The superhero industry has just witnessed one of the most impressive creative comebacks in recent years. With the release of Spider-Noir on MGM and Amazon Prime Video, something that seemed impossible actually happened. The executives loosened their grip, and the result was spectacular. Early press and critic screenings shattered expectations, sending the series soaring past a 90% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And the most surprising part? We're not just talking about another Spider-Man adaptation. We're talking about a genuine lesson for Sony Pictures. While Sony spent the last decade releasing projects that felt like they were chosen by a wheel of bad decisions, with masterpieces such as Madam Web, the unintentionally hilarious phenomenon known as Morbius, and a Venom franchise that refuses to die through sheer survival instinct, Amazon Prime Video and Nicolas Cage managed to accomplish in just 8 episodes something Sony spent 10 years forgetting: respecting the source material. The story takes us to a dark, corrupt New York, so depressing that even the streetlights seem like they need therapy. During the Great Depression, Nicolas Cage puts on the trench coat to play Ben Reilly, a cynical detective who's exhausted, broken, and carrying more baggage than a Monday morning. This isn't the typical superhero who cracks jokes every 10 seconds to sell action figures. He's a shattered man trying to find justice in a city controlled by mobsters who probably have more influence than the mayor. And that brings us to the question many Marvel fans are asking right now. How did the creators take a project that looked doomed from the start and turn it into one of the most acclaimed comic book adaptations of recent years? To understand that, we need to look behind the scenes, because this level of quality didn't appear by magic. It was the result of a full-scale corporate war over the budget. The masterminds behind the project are Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the same creative geniuses responsible for the groundbreaking Spider-Verse animated saga. A few years ago, Sony handed them a multi-million-dollar deal to develop Spider-Man-related content. The problem began when Sony executives saw just how ambitious their vision for Spider-Noir really was. That's when the cold sweat started. According to multiple reports, Lord and Miller wanted to recreate the 1930s using practical sets, stunning noir-inspired cinematography, and a production design that felt authentic from top to bottom. Sony, naturally, responded in the most predictable way possible, trying to slash costs like they were clipping coupons at a grocery store. The tension escalated so much that other Spider-Man projects were reportedly canceled, and there were even threats to walk away from agreements if the show's budget wasn't reduced. Most people would have accepted filming in front of a giant green screen and called it a day. Lord and Miller didn't. They were willing to risk lucrative contracts rather than sacrifice the quality of the project. Eventually, they secured distribution through Amazon Prime Video and MGM, locking in the budget they needed and, more importantly, keeping executives farther away from the scripts than a vampire from sunlight. And that's the real secret behind that impressive Rotten Tomatoes score. With complete creative freedom, they hired writers who genuinely love film noir, gave Nicolas Cage total freedom to build his character, and created a story completely separate from Sony's often chaotic cinematic universe. Now let's talk about the biggest gamble this production took. Hollywood is convinced that if you remove the bright colors and constant jokes from a superhero story, modern audiences will disappear faster than a phone battery at 1%. Amazon, MGM, and the producers decided to ignore that theory completely. That's why the series launched with a unique feature. Viewers can choose to watch it in full color or in authentic black and white inspired by classic noir films. And this isn't just some stylish filter. The black and white version is designed to be the definitive experience, paying tribute to legendary films like The Maltese Falcon. That said, just because the story takes place in 1930s, New York doesn't mean we're watching a detective chase pickpockets through alleyways for 8 episodes. We're still in Spider-Man's universe, and the threats here are a lot bigger than your average wallet thief trying to pay rent. And make no mistake, this series isn't settling for small-time crooks. The villain lineup looks like it was pulled straight from the heavyweight division. On one side, we have the legendary Brendan Gleeson playing the ruthless Silvermane. Then there's Abraham Papula as the brutal mob enforcer Tombstone, and Jack Houston as Flint Marko, delivering a version of Sandman that looks like it crawled straight out of a nightmare. And this is exactly where Amazon gives much of the competition a masterclass. To bring this vision to life, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller recruited Steve Lightfoot as showrunner. the same creative force behind Netflix's brutal and violent The Punisher. And honestly, you can feel his fingerprints on every scene. While some recent productions looked like actors were floating inside an unfinished video game cutscene, Spider-Noir feels heavy, gritty, and real. When Spider-Man fires his webs, swings between gothic skyscrapers, or battles Sandman, every movement feels tangible. The noir-style lighting brilliantly hides the seams of the visual effects while blending them seamlessly with practical stunt work. Nothing here feels plastic. When Spider-Man crashes onto the pavement or takes a punch from Tombstone, your back almost hurts from the couch. The spider powers are no longer designed to look pretty on toy packaging. They're brutal, tactical, and at times genuinely terrifying. But all of this visual brilliance would have fallen apart without the right actor leading the charge. And that's where Nicolas Cage comes in. At 62 years old, Cage has just reminded Hollywood that behind all the internet memes stands one of the most talented actors of his generation. This is a man who won an Academy Award for Leaving Las Vegas and can still dominate the screen with a single glance. And his connection to comic books runs deep. His stage name was inspired by Luke Cage. He almost played Superman in Tim Burton's famously canceled project. And he was the voice of Spider-Man Noir in Into the Spider-Verse. And if there were still any doubts about his comic book obsession, just remember that he named one of his sons Kal-El. Yeah, that's the level we're dealing with. That's why it feels like Nicolas Cage didn't take this role simply to cash a paycheck. He took it because he's been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. And he absolutely delivers. Cage has always been known for throwing himself into his performances with almost reckless intensity. And here, he leaves everything on the screen. One of the smartest decisions made by the creators was moving away from Peter Parker's traditional identity. For legal reasons, and to clearly separate the character from Tom Holland's universe, the protagonist operates under the name Ben Reilly. And Cage plays him in a completely different way. He's not an optimistic teenager cracking jokes while saving the day. He's a bitter private investigator beaten down by life, limping away from fights, drowning his trauma in alcohol, and carrying the weight of a city rotten with corruption on his shoulders. Yet beneath all that exhaustion remains a superhuman force powerful enough to intimidate even the most dangerous criminals. With this performance, Nicolas Cage practically rewrites the rules of the genre. His Spider-Man fights like an old-school street enforcer. He interrogates criminals in dark alleys, breaks bones when necessary, and doesn't hesitate to pull out a revolver when the situation demands it. The worn trench coat, the aviator goggles built into the mask, and that deep, gravelly voice narrating events give the character an overwhelming presence. Cage proves that he doesn't need a shiny suit or digital muscles to command respect. He just needs to show up. That's why Spider-Noir's release represents much more than a simple 90% score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a giant warning siren for the major studios. Because if a detective series set in the 1930s, packed with heavy dialogue, political corruption, brutal violence, and led by a 62-year-old actor, is generating more excitement than several $200 million blockbusters, then something is changing. Audiences no longer want nothing but explosions, automated jokes, and green screens. They want stories with personality. They want creative risks. They want memorable characters. And most importantly, they want to feel that someone genuinely cared about the project. Sure, productions of this caliber require significant budgets, something many companies prefer to avoid. But as long as projects like Spider-Noir continue to exist, there's still hope for the genre. Now it's your turn. If you've already watched the series, what did you think of Nicolas Cage's performance? Did you watch it in black and white, or did you prefer the color version? Let me know in the comments because I want to read every opinion. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.